Kids screaming in their cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. The world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.
Oh my god! Yo guys, what is up? Max on Borderlands 4 video, and today we are updating Ranger Rafa. Now, I wanted to update this build for a few reasons. One, Ranger Rafa is my favorite Rafa build, but two, I made some tweaks to the last Ranger Rafa that I actually am going to be going back on, and I also really want to deep dive into the new weapons, particularly things like the Mercarius, things like the roulette and the Shalashaka, and kind of talk about some adjustments and new gear that we can use on the build, and the tweaks to the skill tree and the rest of the things that I've done to optimize everything. So I hope you guys enjoy the build and the breakdown. Let's get right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Mercarius SMG. This is from the Stone Demon Bounty Pack, and it comes with the unique perk Fleet-Footed. Bullet damage scales with movement speed. Now, this has some obvious synergies with Rafa, because Rafa is the fastest moving character in Borderlands 4, and so I originally went to Ranger Rafa to possibly change the skill tree to accommodate for this weapon and make a whole new build around this thing. And from my testing, basically the Ranger Rafa build as is, spec-wise, is the best way to spec out this weapon. I kind of want to explain and break that down. So Fleet-Footed reads that you get more damage based on your movement speed. That is your movement speed on shot. So if you have spec'd 100% movement speed, and you shoot the gun, but you're standing still, it does no percentage increased damage. And so movement speed, if you're speccing it on the build, is very conditional just for this gun, right? But you're not always even at your full translated movement speed, so even if you have 100% movement speed, you might not be shooting at that value. And so movement speed, the question would be, how good is movement speed on it? Is movement speed a multiplier to the gun's damage? Per 1% movement speed, do I get 2% damage? 1% movement speed equals 5% damage. Is it multiplicative with gun damage? And basically, from all of my testing, movement speed is equivalent to gun damage. So 5% movement speed is equivalent to 5% gun damage, and they are additive with each other. Meaning that if there's a buff that says 30% gun damage, and there's a buff that says 25% gun damage, or 25% movement speed, there is zero reason to take the movement speed. Because one, I mean, you get to move faster, which is fun, but the actual translated damage is always going to be better by speccing gun damage, if that makes sense. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't want movement speed with this weapon. We are getting a lot of movement speed with the spec that I'm going to show you, but basically, for this weapon, there's not really a big priority to spec movement speed over other things. And the number one priority with this weapon to spec is actually fire rate, in my opinion, because its fire rate is abysmal. So with our current setup, we're getting like a ton of movement speed, but I'm not choosing movement speed over gun damage to make this thing work. So to me, this is like the core of Ranger Rafa. Getting Jacques, getting our brain dump, getting deadline, all of these buffs, while also getting Querga for action skill uptime, shield barriers, and resiliencia. We'll talk about all those skill points in a second, but basically that left me with 5 skill points to spend, and those 5 skill points could either be put into El Soldado, which gives us 150% gun damage at full buffs, or it could go into Expedite, which gives us 125% movement speed. You could technically go into Expedite if you really wanted to, but that only works for this gun, which the gun itself isn't like all that great. Like, it's good, but it's not like worth basically sacrificing your build for it. And so I've just been putting those last points into El Soldado, which gives us a lot of gun damage, more so, and it's equivalent and always active. There's no time that you're using this that you're having less damage, versus even if you have 100% movement speed, you're not always getting 100% damage. You're always getting 100% gun damage, basically. So kind of long-winded explanation, but that is why we're like using this gun and not actually speccing any movement speed buffs. And the other thing to mention is the like overdrive class mod. Overdriver. Rafa deals increased ordnance and gun damage the faster he moves while overdrive is active. This bonus is doubled. There is like basically zero reason to ever use this class mod. You move faster while wearing Dancer, and you do more damage while wearing the Dancer class mod. So that isn't changing either for this weapon. Now, before we like dive into the new skill tree, I want to explain why we're not speccing into the old tree. And there's a few reasons. So don't copy this. I'm just showing you this as an example. On the old tree, we specced into Awe and we specced into Fiesta. And in doing so, we lost Resiliencia on the old spec. And I've actually come to not like that, even though technically Awe and Fiesta on paper are more damage because Awe is a true crit and Brain Dump is fake crits. I found myself really missing out on Resiliencia. This gives you stacking damage reduction that makes you unbelievably hard to kill with all of our overdrive bonuses. The number doesn't like display as going up with overdrive bonuses, but it does. And so I found myself dying a lot more on Rafa, and like we do so much damage anyways that I'd rather not die than have like a little bit extra damage. And so I changed the spec back out of Awe and Fiesta, and that's when a viewer approached me and said, by the way, Awe is currently bugged. And so I wanted to show you this. Now, there are setups and reasons that you would use this, but for all intents and purposes, the way that we were using Awe and Fiesta is currently not working, and apparently it broke in the photo mode update. So Awe reads that whenever we shock an enemy, all shots fired at that enemy are critical hits for a duration. This procs, but unless you like reload for some reason, it bugs out. Meaning if you're firing at an enemy with an infinite ammo build, which we are infinite ammo, it won't work for past the 2 seconds. Which is really weird. I don't know if I never noticed this or if it's always worked like this, but I just kind of want to show you this example. So you'll see that I'm critting now, right? And then I'll never crit again. Until this gun runs out of ammo, basically. And I've tried this with a ton of different weapons. So as you saw, like I just never crit again. I was using the Golden God as an example because you can dump the full mag. But for example, this SMG, I've got a Watch for Dinner, so I still proc shocks. You'll see that I get those guaranteed crits, and then I'll just stop. Even though that enemy is still shocked, and I've reloaded now, so Awe will proc. But the rest of these shots, even though they're dotted, I won't get Awe to proc. And the weird thing is not only does that bug out on Awe, but it also bugs out on Fiesta. Fiesta is supposed to give us action skill. Our action skill just stops draining whenever an enemy is status affected, right? We apply a status effect, 2.5 seconds, we don't consume. And you'll see this works at the start, and even though this enemy is status affected, it's still going down. I just reloaded, so it might fix itself. Nope, it went down the entire time, even though they were constantly status affected. And so that is why we are not speccing into those trees. I will report this to Gearbox. Hopefully this gets fixed. I don't believe this is supposed to work like this. Basically, any sources of continuous damage, aka bossing, will make these things not work. Now, if you're constantly target swapping and you're mobbing, these things will work all intents and purposes, but we're speccing in them in the cost of survivability, and the fact that they like don't technically really work on single targets means that they're not worth for us. So that leads us to the updated Ranger Rafa tree, which you'll note is the old like 1.0 build basically. So if you've played that, you're already familiar. But we go Shield Barriers. This goes to like 200% shield recharge rate and shield recharge delay, which is super nice, especially if you don't have Siphon on your shield. If you do have Siphon, you don't need this as much. You could go for like Deft Hands, but once again, we have so much damage. I like the survivability, and it's really cool that like this build actually has a lot of survivability without needing like rep kits or anything like that. Huerga, whenever we crit, we can restore our action skill, and Instantito will also restore our action skill. We use Instantito for mobbing and just swap to Bullet Buddy Deluxe for bossing for the infinite ammo. And then, as I said, we get Resiliencia. This gives us a ton of DR and lets us just sit in enemies' faces. We're using a Dancer class mod to get +1 into Saltado. 2 out of 1 Saltado is not worth it. Experiences massive diminishing returns. Then you want points into Tamario for the extra gun damage. And then in the blue tree, we're getting ammo regen, fire rate, get gun handling. This All Centro will offset the gun handling loss of Tamario, and you'll get a ton of gun damage without actually having to all your guns feel like they suck. Brain Dump stacks up to 75% crit chance. El Soldado stacks up to 150% gun damage. And then we get Jacques for even more overdrive bonus stacking, and Deadline for even more fire rate and reload speed. By the way, I know those buffs don't look impressive on paper if you've never seen this before. But basically, as soon as our action skill starts doing damage to things and we start shooting at stuff, that guy is moving very fast. But you will see, now that we've done some damage, now Brain Dump is 75% crit chance. El Soldado is 150% gun damage. Deadline's a 75% fire rate and reload speed. Basically, you just need Jacques stacks and you need to kill an enemy. Remember that Saltado is a kill skill. So this will proc when you kill an enemy, double all your overdrive bonuses, and all of these will stack. It's like Shield Barriers is now 200% recharge delay rate and 200% recharge delay. Just crazy. For the rest of the guns on this build, we talked about the Mercarius. That is solid on Rafa. I don't think this weapon is all that good, to be honest, but Rafa can make it pretty good. There are like other options to use. This thing will eliminate like a little bit weaker enemies very, very quickly, though. The Shalashashka, I made a whole video guide on this with Harlow. If you can get this thing with Torg impact rounds and Daedalus shotgun, it is one of the strongest mobbing weapons in the game. And if you get splash radius on it, you can actually make its ricochets overlap. So it like ricochets downwards, and then with the splash, you can make it overlap, which is really, really nice on Rafa. I don't think it's quite as good on Rafa as it is on Harlow, but it is a very, very strong weapon. The Dark Beast, still one of the best guns in the game. The bot is fantastic for bossing. You can use it for mobbing on this build too. But this is Ranger Rafa. You have like tons of crit chance, tons of fire rate, tons of reload speed. You can basically use anything. The Golden God, if you can get it with COV and Jacobs, is really nice. The Eigenburst is great on this build. The KOs in basically anything. The Bonnie and Clyde is a favorite on Ranger Rafa. I really like the GMR as well. TK's Wave is great. The Boom Slang, Daedalus Shotgun, Torg Impact rounds will one-shot most things on this setup. There really is just a ton of weapons. However, I do want to specifically talk about the Roulette, because the Roulette is really good because it shoots super fast, and Rafa has infinite ammo. But there's a trick to squeeze out a bit more damage on this with Rafa. We have so many buffs that I can't really see how many roll buffs we have right now. But the Roulette with a Ripper roll turns into a full auto machine gun. However, if you change on your firmware from Deadeye 3 and High Caliber 2 to High Caliber 3, this thing's actually pretty good at killing the Ordinite enemies in the new bounty pack. High Caliber 3 lets your bullets penetrate, and it'll penetrate crystals. Normally, you like need a splash weapon to kill those Ordinite enemies, and like it's still, I'd say, a little bit easier with splash weapons, but the Roulette with High Caliber, all of your bullets can pierce all of those crystals and be hitting like 3 crystals at a time. And so if you're looking for a new boss weapon, I really recommend the Roulette. It's super great on Rafa. So yeah, if you're going to use this, just swap to High Caliber 3. I kind of keep these two on so that if I'm going into the bounty pack, I can use the Roulette with High Caliber. And then for the rest of the gear, we rock a triple bypass with speed on it. The like second roll doesn't matter too much, but a triple rep kit's really important for now with caffeine. Basically, my action skill's not going to wear out here. But basically, whenever we stab ourselves, we get a ton of cooldown back. This is 25% of our action skill back, and with 3 charges, we could just stab ourselves 3 times and basically get all of our action skill back, plus our cooldown. We'll, with that, refund it. For your ordnance, I usually keep a crit knife. Technically, you do benefit from a crit knife because of its true crit. However, not like necessary on Rafa. For the class mod, we're using a dancer. You want as many points into Tamario as possible with +1 soldado. I still haven't farmed for a better dancer. I really definitely need to, but this is the one that I've used in all of my builds. For your shield, we're using a Watts for Dinner with Siphon and Amp. This is in all of my builds. It's super strong. However, I do want to call out that I was using this for all of the footage with the Mercarius. Super Soldier is super fun because it gives us fire rate and more movement speed, but movement speed is really great for the Mercarius. And so I rocked this in that footage with a 25% movement speed roll with Vagabond, which gives us another 28% movement speed and Siphon, so they're never doing damage. We get overshield, and if we get overshield, our shields will feel better. Plus, we have like a ridiculous amount of shield barrier or shield recharge delay and rate. So if you are tired of using the Watts for Dinner or don't have one, the Super Soldier works pretty well on this build. Definitely works better with the Mercarius because you get all of this damage, basically. That 25% movement speed and 28% movement speed are basically, like over 50% gun damage, which is nice. But the other weapons will more than likely benefit more from a Watts for Dinner. And then lastly, for your enhancement, if you want to use the Shalashaka, I would use the Pounder. Most of the time, I'm using Jacob's weapons on this build with the Hat Trick, with Bounce Pass, and Sequencer. You can also use one with the 20% crit chance. This will put you at 95% crit chance. So if you don't like aiming for heads, because that gives us 20%, and this gives us 75% when it's fully stacked, then you're at 95% crit chance, which feels really, really great. But all that's to say is your enhancements are really flexible. If I'm using the roulette, I will put on a Ripper enhancement with hard charger and high roller to stack up tons of extra gun damage, and that really helps with the roulette. But yeah, once again, there's not really a best enhancement for this build. You're kind of swapping them out depending on what weapon you're using because we are so flexible with our weapons. For our specializations, we're rocking Riddle You This for the extra gun damage. Now with Caffeine for the cooldown for action skill whenever it goes down. I Am a Gun gives our action skill damage an increase based off of our gun damage. We have a ridiculous amount of gun damage, so this is pretty fun. Not necessarily needed. You could rock like best defense if you wanted to. I don't really aim down sights all that much. If you are an aim down sights enjoyer, I would rock In the Zone. Personally, I just don't find myself doing it, and I don't feel like enjoying incentivized using it. Usually you're zipping around so fast that like aiming down sights is going to slow you down, which isn't fun. So that's why I'm not using Zone, but personal preference. And then Bullet Train for extra gun damage while walking. This is also just additive soup. So like, it's not another reason to spec movement speed over gun damage. They're all just kind of like equivalent, if that makes sense. But this is more damage and we move very quickly. Guys, that is going to do it for the build guide and the video. Hopefully you enjoyed, learned something new, and good luck farming some of these roles. Ranger Rafa is one of the most fun builds to play in the game, in my opinion, and it's so very flexible. If you don't have these specific weapons or specific roles, promise you the build will still work out very well. Guys, I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye.